Area Cryptid Upset No One Bothered to Inform Him of His Tragic Backstory by Crimson Seekers. Part 3. Hawks groaned as he blinked his eyes open, having spent the night at his own apartment for the first time in several days. Realizing it was the jingle of his work phone that was waking him up, and that if he was being called so early in the morning, then it was most likely the commission calling, he simply sighed and blindly reached out. Finally grabbing the correct phone after a few attempts, he quickly answered and held the device up to his ear. "Hello?" he greeted, attempting to sound as awake as he possibly could. "Hawks," a clipped voice responded. "Are you aware of what's happening on the news right now?" Hawks trailed off, racking his brain for anything he'd seen recently that could possibly have pissed the commission off that could be tied back to him. He couldn't remember making any mistakes on his patrols recently, and he's been pretty on point in all of his interviews, sticking back to the script and getting in and out before Shigaraki would begin blowing his phone up to get back to base and help out. "No?" "Well then." The voice of his handler turned even icier than usual, if it were possible. "I suggest you check." "Alright, give me a second," Hawks responded, obediently throwing off the thick comforter of his bed, and wow, it was fucking freezing. Hawks was harshly reminded of how close winter was, as his feathers ruffled at the sudden temperature change, cringing at the unimpressed noise his handler made in response to the noise. Trying to avoid making his handler's mood worse than it already was, Hawks walked along in his little bird hop to avoid any sounds of his talons clacking against the floor. Shifting his work phone to be held between his head and shoulder, he grabbed his personal cell and shifted through his notifications as he padded into his living room. Kurogiri texted him to pick up milk and tea bags before he came over after his next patrol, and twice had sent a few memes that he didn't really understand, but obligingly sent back an LMAO regardless. He probably shouldn't have given the League his personal number in hindsight, but the burner phone he'd used before didn't do group chats, and Hawks hadn't slept in a few days at the time. Or at least it was convenient, ignoring how incriminating it was. Picking up the remote to his TV, he flicked it onto the nearest news channel, and suddenly understood. Pro-hero feedback has come under fire after newly published allegations of accepting, carrying out, and taking payment for a black market assassination contract of 16-year-old Shinoda K back in 2XX, who until now has been presumed missing. The newspaper that broke this story cited their whistleblower as the League of Villains, and after police checked their CCTV, were able to confirm. Hawks switched the channel, not quite able to believe what he was hearing. Feedback has come out denying the allegations against him. However, video footage uncovered while corroborating information provided by the League is in direct contradiction to his statements. Police have reopened the case of Shinoda K, moving the investigation from a missing persons investigation to a homicide investigation. And how are we as a population supposed to feel that a hero, A, decided to do something like this of his own free will, and B, was able to cover it up for almost 9 years without anyone suspecting a thing? We had to be informed with this by the League of Villains, and I'm not sure what that says for the accountability of heroes. New information brought to light by the League of Villains has revealed that the pro-hero feed can easily be convicted of first-degree murder with this kind of evidence. The situation with feedback is unprecedented, and how this is dealt with is likely going to have repercussions on society as we know it for decades to come. Hawks kept flipping through the news stations, and would have forgotten his handler were he not able to barely make out the breathing on the other end of the phone. Yeah, okay, I think I know what you're talking about now," Hawks said hesitantly. "You sent in notices that indicate you've been spending more time at their hideout these past 2 months than you have on patrol, and you failed to notify us of anything like this potentially happening." It was a statement, not a question, and Hawks barely suppressed a wince. The commission was so not happy with him. Hawks started off hesitantly, trying to figure out how to best navigate the conversation. I honestly didn't know they'd sent that information off. I was there when they uncovered it, but I don't remember anything about them deciding to send it in as an exposé. There. That was a relatively safe way to say, I do remember it happening, however, I had been awake for 53 hours on 2 hours of sleep, and by that point I could taste colors, so I wasn't too sure what had actually happened and what was a hallucination. The Commission expects you to do better, Hawks, his handler told him. He flinched at the cold tone and familiar reprimand, suddenly finding his talons very interesting, avoiding a gaze that wasn't even there. We expect you to better inform us of these events in the future. And then all Hawks could hear was his dial tone. Hawks numbly pulled the phone away from his ear, simply staring at it in his hand. Well, that could have gone significantly better, but it wasn't the worst possible outcome. Sighing, he realized that the metaphorical cold bucket of water that was that whole situation meant he wasn't going to be able to crawl back into bed and go to sleep anytime soon. Deciding to at least have something interesting to watch, and maybe brighten up the shitty start to the day, as he turned off the TV, he simply tossed his work phone onto the couch, while searching for the League group chat in the other. Shooting off a cryptic message, he simply watched and laughed to himself as the replies rolled in as he got ready for his day. Colonel Sanders. Hey, turn on the news. Handkink. Hawks, it is 6:30 in the morning. What could possibly warrant you waking me up? Colonel Sanders. It's funny, I promise. Team Mum. I'm already up, and I have to admit it is quite amusing how effective something the three of you came up with, while that sleep-deprived, works so efficiently. Himiko, please stop changing my username. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Wait, what do we do? She's not wrong, though. Oh my fucking god. Colonel Sanders. Y'all pissed off the Commission big time. They just called me over this shit. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Y'all, he says, as if he didn't contribute as much as the rest of us to what happened. Colonel Sanders. Shut. Handkink. What the fuck are you three even talking about? Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. LMFAO. Come down and watch the news. I gotta see your reaction to this shit in person. Colonel Sanders. Film it, please. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Don't worry, I got you, pretty bird. Himiko. Usually I'd find you two flirting adorable, but it's really early. Colonel Sanders. We're not flirting. Himiko. Eye emoji times 3. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Attach file, shigishock.mp4. Colonel Sanders. LMFAO! Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. He looks so shocked that for once something worked in his favor of his goals, and it wasn't even one of his dumbass plans. Himiko. Wait, what's going on? Double trouble. Up emoji. Stain Stan. Up emoji. Team Dad. Up emoji. Himiko, please stop changing me and Kurogiri's usernames. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Is she wrong, though? Anyway, come and watch the news. I'm fucking losing my mind. Shiggy's in shock. Hawks got pitched at by the Commission. Mama Giri's proud. Stain Stan. Not gonna lie, this low-key worth being waken up before 7 AM for. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. I know, right? Colonel Sanders. Hey, can we get a good job from the team leader? For our outstanding performance with this stunt. Even though I look like a burnt chicken nugget. Up emoji. Himiko. Up emoji. Handkink. No. Colonel Sanders. Sad face. Ochako knew when she woke up that morning, from some foreboding sense in the back of her mind, that something was going to happen. When she heard feet thumping down the hall to the common room, that feeling multiplied. When Deku slammed the door to the common room open with such force that she was surprised it didn't go flying off the doorframe, she supposed that's where the foreboding feeling reached its peak. Deku clearly had something to tell them. He had that little hop in his step when he jogged into the room in a hurry, his hair still wet and dripping onto his shirt from his shower. "Guys, guys, guys!" he said, out of breath. Most of the class was already in the common room, either lounging on the couch doing last-minute homework or getting breakfast. Deku made a beeline for the TV and snatched up the remote. "Turn on the news! Oh my god!" Their classmates made various noises of confusion and asked questions as Deku frantically turned the TV over from the DVD player. But they congregated around the TV regardless, curious of what had gotten him into such a state. When he finally got the TV turned to a news station, the room went cold, and Ochako finally knew what the foreboding sense she had been feeling all morning was coming from. Pro-hero feedback has come under fire after newly published allegations of accepting, carrying out, and taking payment for a black market assassination contract of 16-year-old Shinoda K back in 2XXX, who until now has been presumed missing. The newspaper that broke this story cited their whistleblower as the League of Villains, and after police checked their CCTV, were able to confirm... Oh my. She heard Yayozaru gasp quietly under her breath. Ochako found she quite agreed with the quiet shock. Sometimes Shota wondered if being a teacher was worth it. A majority of the time, his answer would be a resounding no. The day that feedback was revealed to have taken an assassination contract as some sort of sick side business was one of the days that really caused him to wonder if it was worth it. Today, he started, staring out at the faces of his homeroom class. We'll be talking about hero ethics. However, due to current events... Most of the class cringed at his words, so it was nice to know that he could still count on Midoriya to keep the class up to date on major events, so he didn't have to. I'll be going over the basic things a hero should not do, even if it seems painfully obvious. The class was silent, all of them paying attention. Number 1, Shota said, turning around to write on the board. Don't take assassination contracts. Shinoda Bill passes with overwhelming majority in face of protest by Sonoda Shinichi. Following the revelation last month of the murder of 16-year-old Shinoda K under a contracted hit by pro-hero feedback, the people of Japan have been up in arms and calling for accountability. While feedback has since been arrested and is currently awaiting trial for his actions, much of the populace has been calling for the government and Hero Public Safety Commission to ensure that such horrific abuse of power does not happen again. 3 weeks ago, Representative Shimizu Saburo introduced the Shinoda Bill to the Diet, a preliminary action plan in response to the allegations made against feedback by the League of Villains. Absolutely not where action should stop being taken, he says, but certainly a start to regaining the shaken trust of the public. The bill requires all heroes to publicly release their tax returns, disclosing their sources of income, as well as those of their agencies. All heroes will be expected to incorporate body cameras into their hero costumes before the end of the year, giving them a month and a half to make the change. Additional psychological evaluations and mental health checks are also being required. The Shinoda Bill was passed yesterday with an overwhelming majority, bringing an end to... Read more. Where the fuck have you been? Shigaraki snarled in question as Hawk stumbled into the hideout. What the fuck are you wearing? Dabi added on in wonder, glancing up and down at the interesting sweatpants, hoodie, combat boots combo that he'd decided to wear. Dealing with the fallout of your shit, Hawk started, pointing accusingly at Shigaraki. And I can't wear my hero costume around off-duty anymore thanks to this whole body camera thing. So Mirako had to drag me out and help me buy a whole wardrobe since I've never really worn anything else, and overall, it's been a really shitty week. So thanks for that. Body camera thing? Dabi asked, confused as to what precisely Hawks was talking about, but was drowned out by Toga and Twice. Don't worry, you look great, Twice chirped. You look like shit. Didn't you wear anything cute as a teenager? Toga asked. You always look so nice with your red suits during your interviews. They remind me of blood. Okay, Hawk said, in a tone that clearly displayed his displeasure with the topic. We're here to discuss Dabi's tragic backstory, not mine. Kurogiri glanced up at the commotion, took one look at what Hawks was wearing, and sighed long-sufferingly. Give me your sweatshirt, Hawks. The slits for your wings will fray if not hemmed, and I doubt you know how to sew. Hawks groaned, all of his feathers detaching and floating around him as he tugged the article of clothing off, placing it in Kurogiri's expectant hand. His wings quickly reattached themselves. Are you wearing a fleece halter top? Dabi asked incredulously, a cackle rising up in his throat as Hawk's feathers puffed out in agitation. Fuck off, he growled, stalking over to the couch. Shove over, Spinner. I'm freezing. Hawks and Spinner had converted one of the couches into a pile of heating pads and electric blankets fairly early into winter, and it wasn't uncommon to walk into the main room and find the two of them swaddled in blankets, complaining in unison about how they weren't made for the cold. Just migrate, or whatever it is birds do if it's that bad, Dabi said, sipping on his tea with a raised eyebrow. In direct contrast to the two ice cubes across from him, Dabi reveled in the cold. His body was every bit made for the winter as it wasn't for his quirk, and it showed as he kicked his bare feet up on the coffee table. You seriously think Shigaraki and the commission aren't gonna bitch at me endlessly for skipping work if I take off like that? You better not, Shigaraki snapped at him as he walked past, taking his place in front of the "Who the fuck is Dabi" wall. I'll dust you no matter who you are if you don't carry your weight around here. See? Just like that. Alright, here's the summary of our search for Dabi's identity as it currently stands, Shigaraki announced, ignoring Hawk's comment as he finally started the meeting. We've managed to handle most of the possible leads dealing with the Yakuza and quirk trafficking rings, and thanks to Toga's work at infiltrating various police stations, we've managed to confidently rule out Dabi being some sort of new pro who went missing and was covered up. Our current route of investigation is into mysterious disappearances surrounding heroes, since that's apparently more of a thing than we thought it was. We also want to start working on miscellaneous disappearances that have no apparent cause. I finished looking into all the disappearances in Fukuoka, and my agency has moved on to combing the wider Kyushu area, Hawks offered, voice sounding muffled through the blankets, now firmly wrapped around his body. Dabi entertained the thought of calling him a chicken burrito, but saved the thought for another time. Miruku started investigating Hiroshima and other prefectures in Chigoku. She's an independent, so she should be able to move pretty fast. Miruku? Dabi asked, looking over at Hawks in surprise. How'd you get her in on this? Without coming off as hella suspicious, went unsaid. The blanket burrito shifted slightly, and Dabi assumed that the movement translated to a shrug, somehow. She's competitive. I mentioned how the League's closed more cases in the past few months than almost any agency or hero has in the past year, and she took it as a challenge. Woo! Toga squealed, waving her arms around excitedly. Does this mean we might run into Miracle on the job? She's so pretty. Her outfit's white. I bet it shows blood super well. Maybe, Shigaraki said dismissively, his face clearly showing that he did not care. Since Hawks and his fancy agency and hero friends are taking care of Kyushu and Shigoku, that just leaves Hokkaido, Shikoku, and the rest of Honshu. That's like 75% of Japan, Spinner said. With a diligent work ethic, I'm sure we'll get through it in no time, Twice cheered, ever the optimist. It's gonna take forever. This is certainly quite an undertaking, Tomura, Kurogiri commented neutrally from the bar. My life is a nightmare, Dabi muttered blankly. Nah, this is hilarious, Hawks said. And while he wasn't explicitly laughing, Dabi knew those weird little chirps he was letting out were pointed at him. Imagine if we go through all this effort and you don't even have some sort of dramatic background or tragic backstory to justify you being this emo. You're just like a Hot Topic junkie or something. That's fucking worse. Hawks, Compress suddenly interrupted. Dabi and Hawks broke off from their back and forth to look at the magician, who had a contemplative look on his face. You said you were able to coerce Miriko's help in this investigation, yes? I mean, I don't like the way you phrased that, but yes. Would it at all be possible for you to ask other heroes to work on these cases? The more of these that are solved, the less work there will be for us to do. I guess, Hawks agreed hesitantly, a bunch of blankets wiggling around until his hand emerged from the pile, holding his phone up in front of his eyes. Genist is usually pretty happy to help me out. So is Edshot. I talk to Uabami at photo shoots occasionally. She might be willing to listen. Hawks muttered, scanning through his contacts for a few moments, before his arm disappeared back into the blanket, and he began speaking. I can think of some people who might help out, but I know literally nobody from Tohoku or Hokkaido, much less anyone I'm on speaking or asking favors terms with. So you guys are gonna be pretty busy on your own there. Right, Shigaraki starting, redirecting attention to himself. So while Hawks is busy being the kiss-ass that he is, see if I ever help you out again. We'll focus ourselves on Hokkaido, Tohoku, and Tokyo. We'll split into 3 teams. Dabi and Compress will be taking Tohoku since you're the only ones who'll be able to take the cold there and not bitch at me about it every 5 seconds. Isn't Hokkaido further north, though? Spinner asked. Hokkaido at least has hot springs, Shigaraki said. Toga, twice. That's where you two will be working. They'll expect that you might be pulled occasionally if there's any need for reconnaissance or backup from another team. Spade! Toga cheered, high-fiving twice. That leaves you, me, and Kurogiri to work here then, right? Spinner asked. Astute deduction, Shigaraki remarked dryly. Why'd you want to work with me? I don't. Dabi almost winced for Spinner, because Shigaraki pulled no punches on how much he despised all of them. You're just here to crawl through the sewers so I don't have to. God fucking damn it, Spinner muttered into his blanket. Eri, Genius Office, Lurkers, Miriko, and many more joined forces in the largest hero team-up to date, by Fujimoto Ayumi. It is well known by now that the League of Villains has taken a peculiar interest in solving missing person cases in the past 4 months, and the findings and success of their actions has been having ramifications all across the country. Accountability for heroes has skyrocketed, as well as transparency about their actions and incomes, and organized crime rates in Tokyo are at an all-time low. So in Eri, agency of the number 2 hero Hawks announced a press conference on Wednesday in conjunction with number 3 hero Best Genist, number 4 hero Edshot, number 5 hero Miriko, number 7 hero Kamui Woods, number 10 hero Yukyu, and many other top 250 heroes. It was only expected that such an announcement with the presence of so many top heroes would concern the actions of the League. It did, of course. Hawks, the wing hero himself, began the conference explaining the ramifications of the League's actions on a level previously untouched. Vigilantism and vigilante death rates have been at an all-time high since the success of the League became apparent. While organized crime has plummeted in Tokyo, it has skyrocketed in the greater Tokyo region as yakuza and traffickers who evaded capture when found by the League move their base of operations. Then, inviting Best Genist, Edshot, and Miriko to the podium, the 4 jointly announced the largest pro-hero team up to date, the previous being the team organized to strike in Kamino Ward, when UA student Bakugo Katsuki was kidnapped by the League. However, while the Kamino team, made up of UA alumni, was only together for a scant few days, in the time it took to carry out the operation, the new team-up headed by Hawks, Best Genist, Edshot, and Miriko, with alumni from the top 4 hero schools and 113 participating pros and their agencies, spanning from the Okinawa Islands to Chubu and Kanto, will be part of what is likely to be a multi-month project, An investigation into cold missing person cases, a show of strength to prove that the heroics industry has improved by leaps and bounds since they were shelved, and that the populace should not have to rely on villains and vigilantes to find their loved ones, or even a sense of safety. A complex web of agencies and heroes joined together to work in tandem, improving flow of information and backup, trying to track the League and close as many of these cases as possible. Hawks has created. Read more. Dabi wrinkled his nose at the cold pressure against his scars, Toga sticking her tongue out as she attempted to pat down enough foundation into his face to cover up the wrinkled purple skin. "We done yet?" he asked, and she pulled away, tilting her head as she inspected her work. "Pretty sure you've dumped half that bottle on my face by now." "It's really hard to cover up purple, Dabi," Toga whined, patting the sponge under his eyes a few more times. "It'll be really obvious if I miss a spot or it wears off, so it's better to just smother you." "Smothering doesn't really seem your style," he said offhandedly, closing his eyes obligingly as the sponge pressed against his lower eyelids. Toga giggled in response. "Bleeding out is much prettier, don't you think?" "Certainly leaves more of an impact," he said neutrally. He sneezed as something was sprayed on his face, and was coughing by the time Toga let up on whatever she was spritzing on him. "Give me some warning next time. Suffocation isn't my thing." "Sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. She was pulling away and looking over at him as he opened his eyes again. "All right, that should be enough. The foundation says it's waterproof, but don't take any chances." "Thanks," he responded gruffly, rolling up the collar of his turtleneck he'd been stuffed into to hide the parts of his neck that hadn't been covered up. Toga squinted at him as he completed the action. "What?" "You look funny." Dabi raised an eyebrow at the response. "I usually look like a rotting eggplant, and me not looking like that is funny?" "No, it's just..." Toga waved her hands uselessly, mouth twisting as she searched for what she was trying to say. "You don't look like Dabi," she finally came up with, after a few moments. "That's kind of the point." "No, I mean, you look like someone else. I know what people look like, and your entire facial structure looks different. You don't look like you." Dabi blinked slowly at her. "I'm not sure I'm following." Toga huffed, before taking out her phone and quickly taking a picture of his face, before handing it to him. Dabi took the phone and simply stared. Toga, as a certified shapeshifter, had always been particularly sensitive to people's appearance being out of place, and he'd assumed that she was just overreacting. But actually seeing what she was talking about? Yeah, Dabi could kind of see her point. His face was a lot softer, more round and less sharp, with his staples and scars covered. His face held a sort of youthful energy it didn't have before, with his external eye bags weighing down his eyes. He looked like someone completely different. "See?" Toga said probingly. "You don't look like Dabi. You look like not Dabi." "Yeah, I can definitely see what you were talking about now," Dabi agreed distractedly, still staring at his face. "I don't like it," she muttered, crossing her arms. Dabi sighed, racking his brain to figure out how to deal with the situation he was presented with. There were main problems to deal with. The first was that Toga could likely smell him as Dabi, but couldn't see him as Dabi, which understandably upset and confused her slightly. The second being that Toga was exceptionally fond of his scars and staples, and not being able to see them was probably half the problem. "I know you don't," Dabi said slowly, picking his words carefully as Toga looked at him. "But me and Compress don't know the back alleys to Tokoku as well as we do here, so it's best that we don't look like ourselves so we can travel freely. So how about this? If I pull a staple or start bleeding anywhere, I'll send you pictures, and each night when I take the makeup off, I'll send you a picture so you know I'm still me. Sound like a deal?" Toga sniffed, and after a moment, nodded her head. Dabi gave her a smile and ruffled her hair as he stood up from her bed. Make sure you've got everything packed. You can call Kurogiri if you need anything, but it's probably best not to bother him excessively, he said, strolling out of her room as she chirped an affirmative. Strolling into the main room, he announced, Guess you got a new look, fuckers. Compress, Kurogiri, Spinner, and Hawks, who he didn't even realize would be there, looked over at him simultaneously. Most of them simply blinked and squinted at him, while Hawks made a strangled noise and inhaled the mouthful of water he'd been trying to drink. When Spinner thumped Hawks back as the hero tried to cough up his lungs, Kurogiri and Compress simply looked over at him appraisingly. You certainly look different, Compress said after a moment. Dabi rolled his eyes. Yeah, that's what Toga said. Anything else? Compress hummed for a second, before shrugging his shoulders. You look good, Dabi. Thanks, Dabi said, tilting his head slightly at the response. Hawks had finally finished hacking up his diaphragm, and was looking at him like he'd seen a ghost or something, causing Dabi to raise an eyebrow judgmentally in his direction. Too sexy for you? What? No, that's not it, he said, shaking his head and waving his hands around. His wings fluttered slightly with the movements, and Dabi allowed his eyes to follow them for a moment, before looking back at Hawk's face as he got his words in order. Not that you don't look great, hot stuff. You just reminded me of someone, and I really wasn't expecting it. Dabi felt something tug in the back of his mind, like something wasn't quite right, but unable to figure out what the problem was, simply narrowed his eyes at the hero before shrugging. All right. What are you doing here, then? Hawk shrugged, wings relaxing from their startled position as the topic shifted. We're all going to be pretty busy for the next month or two. Thought I'd see you guys off, since flying up to Tohaku or Hokkaido in the middle of winter isn't my idea of a good time. Oh, but you'd still fly up here to Tokyo to visit lizard lips and handfuck? I want a divorce, Dabi snarked, letting himself fall into the couch across from the furnace. There was Hawks and Spinner's perch. Nah, I'm only coming up here for the food. Kurogiri makes the best yakitori I've ever had. That's fair. Dabi, you finished packing? Kurogiri asked, interrupting the conversation. Yeah, it's mostly a bunch of turtlenecks and like 50 bottles of concealer and foundation. Not much to remember. You sure you don't need a coat? I thrive in the cold. If anyone asks, I'll just say my quirk's cold resistance or something. It's not too far off the mark. Please bring one with you just in case, Kurogiri said, turning away to head back into the kitchen. Cold resistance does not equal cold proof. Yeah, I'll toss one in, Dabi responded, waving him off. Oh my god, he sounds just like Tsunaga, Hawks whispered under his breath after a few moments. At the inquiring looks from both Dabi and Spinner, he clarified. Best Jeanist. Kurogiri sounds exactly like Best Jeanist, guys, he said, looking as if he just had a revelation. Dabi felt a mocking smile across his face as he realized the implications. Are you saying that Best Jeanist parents you? Hawks blinked at him. Is that what it is? His face scrunched up as he thought. I suppose that explains why Mirako kept asking me why I didn't buy him a Best Dad mug for his birthday this year. I was wondering about that. Oh my fucking god, Hawks.